My name is Michael Sloan. I'm 53 years old, and until a few months ago, I lived under the comfortable illusion that I had a solid 28-year marriage with my wife, Lauren. We built a life in a quiet New Hampshire suburb, just outside of Manchester, in a house I built with my own two hands, a labor of love. I laid every plank, every nail, every shingle. It was supposed to be our forever home. We raised our daughter, Caitlin, there, watched the leaves turn orange each fall, had lazy Sundays on the porch, and passed each other in the hallway with half-smiles and inside jokes that had grown with us over the years. I truly believed we were the kind of couple that had made it through life storms, battle-tested and still standing. Looking back now, I wonder how many of those smiles were real. The day everything shifted didn't start out unusual. It was a Wednesday, I think. Lauren had gone to a yoga class in the morning, then came home and told me she was heading upstairs for a quick shower. Before she left her phone on the counter, she asked, like she had 100 times before, if I could back up her photos and free up space. She's always been a bit careless with digital stuff, and I've always been the one who handled anything with wires or passwords. So I sat down at the kitchen table, her phone in hand, and plugged it into the laptop. Coffee brewing, rain tapping at the window. Routine. Familiar. Safe. I opened the photo archive, and as expected, there were hundreds of images. Meals she'd cooked, selfies with friends, **TS of outfits she liked. I began transferring them into our shared cloud folder, the same one we'd been using for over a decade. Then I noticed it. Buried under the normal folders, Family 2024, Garden, Recipes, was one labeled with what looked like a random jumble of letters and numbers. Something like DCM 2341-22. Not a name, not something she'd recognize or expect me to click on. But it wasn't system-generated either. That caught my eye. Inside were about 24 photos. Most were normal enough. Some flowers, a coffee cup, **T of her shoes. But then, halfway through, I stopped scrolling. There was a picture that didn't belong. Lauren was sitting in a sunlit cafe I didn't recognize. Her hair was styled, makeup done more than usual. She was wearing a sleek black dress I'd never seen before, tight-fitting, elegant. Her smile was wide, but not the one she used at home. The smile was alive, electric. And then I saw him, a man, maybe early 40s, wearing a red track jacket and a baseball cap. He wasn't facing the camera directly, but his cheek was turned toward her, and Lauren was kissing it. Her hand was on his shoulder. His hand was casually placed around her waist. It wasn't a peck between old friends. It was **mate. Comfortable. I stared at it for a long time. Long enough that the coffee machine beeped to remind me it was done. Long enough for my palms to start sweating. My mind started racing, but I wasn't ready to let it spiral yet. I still had that instinct in me, that deeply conditioned belief that there had to be a reasonable explanation. So when she came downstairs, towel wrapped around her head, I tried to sound casual. "Hey, honey," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I found a photo I don't recognize. Who's the guy?" She walked over, peered at the screen, and didn't miss a beat. "Oh," she said lightly, brushing her damp hair over one shoulder. "That's Sam. We ran into him by the waterfront. Remember Sam? He used to work at my old office, the one near Concord." She leaned in a bit closer, then shrugged. "He recognized me while I was walking back from the spa. We just caught up over coffee. That's all." "That's the day you said you went to the spa with Angela and Trish, right?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, looking me square in the eyes, calm as a monk. "They dropped me off early, and I went for a walk along the boardwalk before our appointment. Just ran into him by chance. It was nice to catch up. He always had a thing for corny jokes. There was no nervous laughter, no flicker of discomfort. Her voice didn't hitch, her pupils didn't dart. If she was lying, she was damn good at it." I nodded slowly, feeling a tight knot in my chest. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I was overreacting. I mean, she did used to work in Concord. She did have friends from back then. And she had mentioned the waterfront before. Still, why hide that folder? Why that dress? Why a kiss? That night, I tried to convince myself to let it go. I told myself that I knew Lauren, that she wouldn't lie to me, at least not about something like that. We'd been through too much. We'd seen each other through the birth of our daughter, the loss of both our parents, a cancer scare. You don't come out of those fires without a kind of unshakable bond. Or so I thought. She fell asleep early, like always. Her breathing evened out within minutes. Her back turned to me under the covers. I stared at the ceiling, hands folded over my chest, mind racing. That photo played on loop in my head. Her smile. The way she leaned into him. The kiss. I tried to remember the last time she smiled at me like that. I couldn't. The next morning, Lauren hummed while making her tea, chamomile, as always. She moved through the kitchen like nothing had changed, like I hadn't spent the entire night wide awake, replaying that photo over and over. She even kissed my cheek on her way out, saying, "Don't forget we've got Caitlin's video call on Sunday." I nodded and waved, watching her back as she walked through the front door, keys jingling like tiny bells. I wanted to scream after her. Ask her why the dress. Why the hidden folder? Why him? But I didn't. I just stood there in my bathrobe, heart pounding, pretending everything was still okay. That day was a blur. I barely touched my lunch. I couldn't focus on the books I'd been meaning to read. Instead, I wandered from room to room, each one filled with little pieces of our shared life. The photo of us at Niagara Falls in '06. The coffee table I built during lockdown. The coat hook she insisted we hang lower because it looked friendlier to guests. All of it suddenly felt like part of a museum exhibit, frozen relics of something that might have already ended without me realizing. And the more I thought about it, the more things didn't sit right. Over the past year and a half, Lauren had made changes. At first, I chalked it up to a midlife awakening. She started working out. Not just casual treadmill stuff, serious personal training, full-body workouts, nutrition plans. She changed her diet completely. Gave up wine, started drinking protein shakes. I admired her dedication. At first. Then came the wardrobe refresh. Gone were the oversized sweaters and simple jeans. She bought form-fitting dresses, heels she hadn't worn since her 20s, and perfume I didn't recognize. She said it was about feeling good in her skin. I believed her. The eye surgery came next. Laser correction. She'd always worn glasses, said they gave her character. But one morning she woke up and decided she didn't want them anymore. That was the word she used, anymore. Not needed. Not liked. Just gone. Then the phone habits changed. At first, she would leave it charging in the living room. But gradually it migrated to the bedroom. Then to the bathroom. Notifications stopped popping up. Messages were silenced. I remember joking about how secretive she'd become. She laughed it off, saying, "You know how these apps are, they ding every 5 seconds. Drives me nuts." I wanted to believe it. I really did. But now, with that photo burned into my mind, every one of those things took on a new shade of meaning. Her gym days started running long, 3 hours sometimes. The gym was 15 minutes away. I asked her once if she stayed late to shower or chat. She said the trainer liked to push them harder on Fridays. Fridays. Always Fridays. And then there were the messages I'd accidentally glimpsed months ago. A preview on her lock screen that read, "You free to talk? Am driving." I remember asking, "Who's that?" She said it was a group chat with her friends. She didn't show me the screen. Just gave a quick, "It's nothing," and tucked the phone away. Nothing, I had repeated, half joking. That's what they always say in crime movies right before things explode. She had laughed. "Well, don't worry, detective. No plot twists here." God, the irony. It was like looking back through a window that had been fogged over. Things were blurry when I looked at them the first time, but now they were painfully clear. There was the day she came home flushed, hair messy, claiming her Zumba class had been intense. She smelled different. Not bad, just not like Lauren. When I asked if she'd changed her shampoo, she laughed and said, "Nope, just borrowed a friend's at the gym." I shrugged it off. And then the time she got defensive when I asked her to put a friend on speaker during a call. It was an innocent ask, I just wanted to say hi. But she had pulled the phone away, saying she's in a bad mood. Trust me, you don't want to hear it. That had been 6 months ago. I hadn't thought about it since. Now, each of these little moments stuck to me like shards of broken glass. The truth wasn't coming at me all at once. It was bleeding in slowly, drop by drop. That evening, I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta with garlic and oil. Lauren got home around 7, cheeks flushed, gym bag slung over her shoulder. She kissed me on the cheek again, said her trainer had really led them today. Then she hopped into the shower without even sitting down. That's when it hit me, I hadn't seen her gym bag opened once. Not once. I walked over and zipped it open. Inside were a pair of clean shoes, folded gym clothes that hadn't been worn, and a towel that still smelled like detergent. She always bragged about how much she sweated, called it her glow badge. But this bag was spotless. She came out of the shower 15 minutes later, wrapped in a towel, hair wet and clinging to her shoulders. I stood in the kitchen, trying to smile. She poured herself sparkling water and leaned against the counter. "Long day?" I asked. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Exhausting. I might crash early." And she did. Curled up in bed by 10. Soft breathing. Peaceful. Like nothing was wrong. But I couldn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, thinking about all the times she said she was at Angela's, all the Fridays she worked late or needed some time to herself. I tried to replay every timeline, match every excuse with the image of that man in the photo. The man in the red jacket. The man whose name was supposedly Sam. She never gave me a last name. The next day, while she was at yoga, I scoured her desk for old office directories, cards, anything from her time working in Concord. I found a stack of old HR documents and team-building flyers, but no Sam. No Sam's on any list. No farewell card with that name. I even checked the comments on her old Facebook work anniversary post. Nothing. I Googled Sam Concord office Lauren. Nothing but noise. At that point, I didn't know if I was going mad or finally waking up. By the weekend, I was jumpy. I kept thinking she'd notice. That she'd sense I knew something. That she'd change the locks on the truth and I'd never get back in. On Saturday night, I watched her from across the dinner table. She was laughing at some cooking show, sipping red wine, twirling her fork. And all I could think was, who are you? That night, while she slept, I sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the dark woods behind our house. The same woods I used to take Caitlin hiking through when she was little. The same woods where Lauren and I once watched a meteor shower and whispered wishes we'd never speak aloud. Now those woods felt like the only place that made sense. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But I knew this, the story Lauren had been telling me, the story of our life, had cracks. And the light seeping through those cracks wasn't warm or familiar. It was cold. And real. A week passed. I didn't confront her. I didn't explode. I didn't even ask another question about Sam. Instead, I smiled when she smiled, nodded when she talked about her personal trainer's new techniques, and kissed her forehead when she headed out the door. Gym bag bouncing on her shoulder like a pendulum counting down to something I couldn't name yet. But every hour she was away, I was digging. And every time I thought maybe I'd imagined it all, the facts kept slapping me back to reality. The old cloud account was the key. Years ago, when we got our first shared devices, we created a synced cloud backup mostly for photos and documents. Over time, it became one of those digital relics you forget about. We hadn't used it in ages. But when I logged in using our shared credentials, thankfully unchanged, it synced again. Quietly. Patiently. And that's when I found it. At first, it was just the usual stuff, old grocery lists, PDFs of bills, some blurry photos of family trips. But then I hit a folder called Molly. It was odd because we didn't know any Mollys. And the date stamps on the files were recent. Inside were text message backups. Dozens. Hundreds. Some were just text, half conversations, filled with abbreviations, pet names I'd never heard. But a few had audio files attached. At first, I thought maybe Lauren had been dictating notes to herself or using a voice-to-text app. Then I pressed play on one. A low, smooth male voice chuckled. "You sounded so hot this morning," he said, clearly speaking into a phone. "I couldn't stop thinking about you." "And your husband? Still thinks you're with your aunt?" There was a pause. Then Lauren's voice came through, quiet but unmistakable. "Of course. Michael believes everything. Always has." My hands were shaking. I played it again. And again. In another recording, he whispered, "I miss your bed. Miss that stupid alarm clock of yours. You left your necklace on the nightstand, by the way." Her reply? "Good. Let it sit there. He never notices anything." My blood went cold. I stood there in the garage where I'd hidden myself away like a criminal and suddenly felt like I was the one who had been caught. My legs almost gave out. I had to sit on the tool bench just to breathe. There were dozens more like that. Some romantic, some crude. Some playful, like teenagers passing notes. One in particular had her voice trembling with laughter. "If I get caught, I'll blame you. Tell Michael you're my yoga instructor and I'm working on my core." And then she added, almost as an afterthought, "He never suspects. Never asks questions. It's scary how easy it is." That sentence felt like a blade. Scary how easy it is. What crushed me wasn't just the affair. It was the contempt, the ease, the confidence in my ignorance. I wasn't just a victim of infidelity. I was the butt of an inside joke. I sat there in the dark for an hour, phone still in my hand, the blue glow of the screen casting long shadows across the garage. And in that silence, I realized I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was something worse. I felt stupid. Stupid for missing the signs. Stupid for believing the spa stories. Stupid for building a life with someone who saw me as a fool in his own house. I didn't eat that night. Didn't drink. Just lay in bed next to her, pretending to sleep. She turned once in the middle of the night and brushed her hand against mine. I stayed still. Not because I didn't want to react, but because I didn't know how. I kept playing that phrase in my mind like it was on a loop. He never suspects. The next morning, I watched her pack her gym bag. She kissed my cheek and asked if I needed anything from the store. "We're low on eggs," I replied. She smiled. "Got it." Then she was gone. I knew what I had to do. That afternoon, I contacted a divorce lawyer. Just a consult, nothing formal yet. The woman on the phone was kind but firm. "Do you have evidence?" she asked. "Yes," I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "More than enough." She explained the process, the documents I'd need to gather. Property division, financial disclosures, spousal support. It all sounded mechanical, like assembling a desk. Step 1, file this. Step 2, sign that. But the emotional weight, that part wasn't in any manual. That night, I started pulling files. Bank statements, tax returns, photos of the house, everything I might need to build my escape route. Because that's what it felt like. Escape. Not from Lauren exactly, but from the version of my life I thought was real. Over the next few days, I was polite, civil. I cooked dinner. I took out the trash. I even watched a show with her, laughed at the jokes. And inside, I was planning a silent exodus. I wanted to leave with dignity. Not in a blaze. Not screaming. Just gone. I even found an old cabin in Vermont. A place I used to visit with friends from work years ago. Secluded. Wooded. Quiet. It was listed on a seasonal rental site, cheap, no questions asked. I booked it under a different name just for a week at first. Then I packed a bag. Passport. IDs. Birth certificate. A couple changes of clothes. I withdrew $9,000 from our joint account. Not all of it, just half. Fair share. I told myself that as I stood at the ATM, the machine whirring like it was judging me. That night, I texted Caitlin from a burner number I'd picked up at a gas station. Told her I was heading up north for a last-minute job. "No signal in the woods," I said. "Just for a few days." She replied, "That's random, Dad. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before writing back. "Yeah, just needed some space to think." She sent a thumbs-up emoji and a heart. That's when I cried. For the first time since I found the recordings. Not for Lauren. For Caitlin. For the version of her childhood that was now tainted by something she didn't even know yet. I left before sunrise. Lauren was asleep. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, watching her breathe. Her hand rested where my pillow used to be. I thought about waking her. About telling her everything. About confronting her with all the recordings, the lies, the photo. But instead, I walked out. I didn't leave a note. I didn't slam the door. I just disappeared. The bus pulled out of Manchester just after 5 a.m. I sat near the back, hood up, head low, my duffel bag wedged under the seat. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. Just hollow. The kind of emptiness you don't feel in your chest, but in your hands, your spine, your eyes. I watched the trees blur past the window, felt the subtle sway of the road, and listened to a woman behind me snore softly. She had no idea I was disappearing. No one did. Vermont welcomed me with fog and silence. The cabin was even more remote than I remembered. Set deep in the woods off a gravel road, it had no Wi-Fi, no TV, no cell service unless I climbed a nearby hill and stood in one exact spot by a dead pine. The lock on the door stuck a little, but the key worked. Inside, it smelled of cedar and old smoke. A wood-burning stove sat in the corner, cold and patient. The bed was covered in a plaid blanket, scratchy but warm. I dropped my bag and just stood there, listening to the silence. For a man who had been lied to, mocked behind his back, and robbed of what he thought was his reality, the silence was the closest thing to comfort I'd felt in months. The first couple of days passed like fog. I woke at dawn, chopped wood behind the cabin, brewed strong coffee on a camp stove, and wandered the trails nearby. I found myself talking aloud sometimes. Not to anyone, just to the trees, the wind, my own thoughts. By the fourth day, I started making plans. Small ones. I found an old forestry crew on a local bulletin board and offered to help with tree clearing and trail maintenance. Cash jobs. No questions. The men didn't ask where I was from, and I didn't offer it. We worked quietly. They thought I was a retired teacher or an ex-military guy who wanted off-grid peace. I let them think whatever they wanted. I slept better out there. Not great, but better. The cabin creaked at night, but it was honest. The wind made noise, but it didn't lie to me. No vibrating phones. No hushed voices in the next room. No gym bags full of clean and used clothes. One night, maybe 2 weeks in, I lit a fire in the stove and found a notebook in a drawer. Blank pages. I started writing, not a journal, not quite. More like fragments. Sentences. Observations. I wrote, people don't fall out of love. They peel away from it. I wrote, I'm not heartbroken. I'm truth broken. I wrote, she kissed him like she used to kiss me when we were still real. On the 15th day, I drove into a nearby town to open a new bank account. Small credit union. The teller was polite, asked for ID. I used my real name but a new mailing address, just a P.O. box. I transferred the rest of my half of the joint savings into it. I didn't touch Lauren's half. I didn't want to be accused of anything, not even indirectly. I bought a prepaid phone, just for emergencies, and a second one to contact Caitlin. That night, I messaged her again, work's been intense, kiddo. Don't worry if I'm slow to reply. No signal most days. Love you. She responded within the hour, miss you. Mom's been a mess. I think she's worried. You okay? I stared at the screen for a long time. Eventually, I typed, tell her I'm fine. Just need time. I almost didn't hit send. But I did. Weeks passed. My beard grew out. I picked up side work, chopping firewood, fixing a roof, clearing trails. I worked with my hands until they ached. One of the guys, Brian, was a Vietnam vet. He never asked about my story, but he did say once over coffee, some things you don't talk through. You just survive them. I nodded. I knew exactly what he meant. I started eating better. No processed junk. Just fish, beans, vegetables. I read old books from the town's library and listened to local radio. The loneliness didn't go away, but it stopped screaming. It became a hum. 4 months in, the snow came. Early and heavy. I was ready for it. I had stacked firewood, sealed the windows, insulated the pipes. The cold was sharp, but it felt cleaner than what I'd left behind. One evening, as the snow whispered down outside, I stood by the fire with a cup of tea and thought, maybe this is what rebirth feels like. Not loud, just quiet. Then the letter came. It arrived at the P.O. box in town. No return address. Just my name written in the handwriting I knew better than my own. Lauren. My breath caught. My fingers trembled as I held the envelope. It was thick, too thick for just a note. I drove back to the cabin in silence, envelope resting on the passenger seat like it might explode. When I finally opened it, I found 10 pages. Handwritten. No typed words. No shortcuts. Just ink and confession. She said she had found me through a private investigator after weeks of searching. Said she debated sending the letter, debated coming in person. But in the end, she wrote because she had to. Because she owed me the truth even if I never read it. She wrote about how everything fell apart after I left. Friends asked questions. Neighbors speculated. Some avoided her altogether. Caitlin grew distant. She admitted the affair had ended weeks before I left. Said she had tried to end it even earlier, but every time she pulled away, she fell back in. Because it wasn't about him. Not really. It was about feeling seen. Feeling wanted. Not an excuse, she wrote, but maybe an explanation. She wrote that she had filed for divorce on her own. That she wasn't contesting anything. That she didn't want the house. That she wouldn't touch a cent of what I had taken. She said, you were always more decent than me. I want to leave you with what little decency I have left. Then, near the end, she wrote about Caitlin. She's getting married, she wrote. She wants you there. Wants you to walk her down the aisle. She doesn't know everything. I've kept the worst of it from her. But she knows you left. She just doesn't know why. The last line broke me. If you can't forgive me, I understand. But please don't let my failure rob Caitlin of her father. I folded the letter. set it on the table, stared at the fire for what felt like hours. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking I didn't leave because of rage. I left because I couldn't recognize the world I was living in. And now, the same world was asking me to step back into it, at least for one day. The next morning, I packed a small bag and left the cabin. Not to return to the past, but to face it, one last time. I arrived in White River Junction 2 days later. It was cold, overcast, and the town looked like it hadn't changed in years. There's something oddly comforting about places like that. Places that don't shift while everything else inside you does. I checked into a modest motel just off the main road. No frills, but clean. Quiet. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not even Caitlin. Especially not Caitlin. I needed to do this on my terms. Lauren had written the name of the hotel where she'd be staying, along with a date and time. If you don't show up, she wrote, I'll never contact you again. You have my word. It didn't read like a threat. It read like a woman who finally understood the weight of consequences. That, or she was just done trying. I sat in the motel room the night before our meeting, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly. I thought about turning back, about skipping town and sending a postcard that simply said, too late, but I couldn't do it. Not because I wanted reconciliation. God, no. That ship had long sunk. But because I had questions. I needed to hear her say it out loud. I needed closure. Not for the marriage. For me. The next morning, I walked to the hotel she'd mentioned. It was one of those refurbished brick buildings downtown, historic on the outside, overly modern inside. I stood outside for a minute watching people pass by, each one carrying their own invisible story. Then I went in. Lauren was already there, sitting in a booth in the back of the hotel's cafe. She looked different. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Her face was thinner. No makeup. Her hair was tied back messily. Not the usual polished look she always maintained. There was a tiredness around her eyes that makeup couldn't have covered anyway. And when she saw me, she didn't jump up, didn't smile. She just nodded. A silent acknowledgement. I sat across from her. No hug. No handshake. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice hoarse. I nodded. Let's talk. For a few seconds, she just looked at me, studied me like she wasn't sure I was real. Then she took a breath. I won't make excuses, she said. You don't owe me forgiveness. I know that. Good, I replied. I wanted to tell you the truth, at least once, because I don't want you leaving again thinking it was all just lies. I raised an eyebrow. Wasn't it? Her eyes dropped. Some of it, yes. More than you probably know. But not everything. Like what? I asked. She looked up again, met my eyes. Like the fact that I didn't start it because I wanted to hurt you. I started it because I didn't know who I was anymore. That's convenient, I said, not harsh, just flat. She nodded. I know how that sounds, but it's the truth. After Caitlin moved out, the house got so quiet. And we got comfortable, predictable. You were always busy with work or the garage or your books. I wasn't blaming you. Don't. I cut her off. Don't say you're not blaming me right before blaming me. She swallowed, silent for a beat. I felt invisible, she said finally. And I hated myself for feeling that way, because I knew I had a good life, a stable husband, a beautiful daughter, a house we built with our own hands. But it still felt empty. And instead of facing that, I ran from it, into something stupid, something selfish. I let her words hang in the air. Why hide it so well? I asked. If it was just confusion, if it wasn't about hurting me, why mock me? Why tell him I swallowed everything? Why treat me like a joke? She winced. That line. I regret that more than you know. I wasn't thinking. I was trying to sound cool. I was pretending I was someone else. But I wasn't pretending, I said quietly. I was there, living it. I know, she whispered. We sat in silence for a moment. The man, I said. Was he special to you? She shook her head. No, he was just there. He paid attention, made me feel something. But it wasn't love. It wasn't even about him. It was about me trying to be someone I hadn't been in years. And when did it end? About a month before you left, she said. He wanted more. I didn't. I felt sick around him. It had stopped being exciting. Started feeling like I was cheating on myself. You were cheating on me? I said sharply. She nodded again. Yes, I was. And I'll carry that forever. I looked down at the table. The surface was smooth, reflective. I saw my hands, slightly weathered, curled into fists. I filed for divorce, she said after a pause. Didn't contest anything. Gave my attorney instructions to let you take whatever you needed. I saw that, I replied. I'm not trying to get anything from you, she added. I just wanted to be honest. At least once. There was another pause. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. I wanted to give you this, she said, sliding it across the table. I stared at it but didn't touch it. It's from Caitlin, she said. She's getting married in August. She wants you there. Wants you to walk her down the aisle. I looked up slowly. She knows. She knows you left. She doesn't know why, Lauren said. I didn't tell her. I didn't want her to hate me. She deserves the truth. I know, Lauren said softly. But that should come from you. When you're ready. I picked up the envelope. It was light. Inside was a card. Hand-drawn hearts around a simple message. Please be there, Dad. It wouldn't be right without you. My chest tightened. I closed the card and put it in my jacket. I'll be there, I said quietly. Lauren exhaled. A deep, weary breath. Thank you, she said. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We stood slowly, awkwardly, two people who used to be everything to each other and were now nothing more than shared history. As I turned to leave, she called out softly, Michael. I stopped but didn't turn. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I know, I said, then walked away. Back in the motel, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the card again. Caitlin's handwriting hadn't changed since high school. Loopy, deliberate, full of personality. I could picture her biting her tongue as she wrote, eyebrows furrowed. That night, I stared out the window at the streetlights and thought, maybe I don't need to disappear anymore. Maybe it's time to stop running, but not to return to who I was, to choose who I could become. The morning of Caitlin's wedding came with a strange calm. I hadn't seen Lauren since that day at the hotel, but the divorce papers had been finalized quietly, just as she promised. There were no calls, no angry letters, no bargaining. For the first time in a long time, things felt settled. Not healed, just settled. I arrived at the venue early. A lakeside lodge in Vermont, all pine and glass and soft string music playing from hidden speakers. Caitlin greeted me in her robe, hair in curlers, eyes glassy with joy and nerves. Dad, she said, holding me tight. I'm so glad you're here. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I whispered. When Lauren walked in an hour later, she kept her distance. We exchanged a nod, just that. And it was enough. She wore a modest navy dress, her hair up, her face bare. There was no mask anymore, no performance. Later, during the ceremony, I walked Caitlin down the aisle with my heart thudding like it hadn't in years. Not from fear, from pride. She looked back once, smiling through tears, and in that moment, everything, every betrayal, every sleepless night, every silent cabin morning, felt like it had led here, to this clean moment, unstained. After the dance with my daughter, I stepped away into the garden to breathe. That's when Abby found me. We'd met a few months back. She was a college writing instructor who sometimes volunteered at the Trail Conservancy. Our conversations had started about books, trees, and wildflowers, but eventually turned toward life and truth. She never pried, never pushed. She just listened. She smiled now as she approached. You clean up well, she teased. Then her tone softened. You okay? I nodded. Better than I expected. We sat on a bench near the water, the sun setting behind the hills, golden and forgiving. Abby looked at me for a moment, then asked, Are you still running? I exhaled. Thought about the cabin, the woods, the letter, the firelight. No, I said quietly. I'm finally moving forward. Abby and I didn't jump into anything fast. We took walks, long ones, talked about everything from poetry to pain. She never asked me for promises. Only honesty. That alone felt like a gift. One afternoon, we hiked a trail just outside Bar. At the summit, she looked out over the valley and said, "You know, starting over doesn't mean erasing the past. Just choosing what comes next." That stuck with me. Back in New Hampshire, I started fixing up the old house. Not the one I left, but the cabin. I added shelves, repainted the walls, even planted herbs. I made it mine, one detail at a time. Lauren and I never became friends. But when Caitlin sent wedding photos, I saw a picture of her. Standing beside me in the ceremony, expression soft, not haunted. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just release. I sent a note to Caitlin later that week. "Tell your mom she looked peaceful. I hope she finds more of that." Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but it meant letting go of what no longer belonged in my hands. On a quiet evening not long after, Abby and I sat on the porch, mugs of tea in hand, watching the stars come out. She leaned into me and whispered, "You seem lighter." "I am," I said. "Not fixed, but finally free." And that was enough.